Back during their college years, Nicholas managed to win Alice over with an effortless charm that left her friends quietly wishing they were in her shoes. Initially she dismissed him, finding his personality a bit peculiar, quirky even. But as her paths continued to cross, Alice started seeing past the oddities and recognized a side of Nick she hadn't noticed before. What once seemed strange now revealed itself as genuine kindness and an extraordinary heart. Slowly Alice realized she had been wrong about him. He might actually be everything she'd been hoping for without knowing it. That rocky beginning quickly faded into the background. By the time their graduation caps hit the air, the two of them were inseparable in every way. 3 years into their relationship, Nicholas didn't hesitate when he decided it was time to propose. Alice, glowing with happiness, gave him an enthusiastic yes. They both agreed to hold off on starting a family, wanting to fully enjoy their time together as a couple before diving into parenthood. However, their decision wasn't exactly popular with their parents, who seemed to find every opportunity to drop hints or outright complaints about wanting grandkids. Nick and Alice often laughed it off. It was easier to joke about it than to repeat the same explanation over and over again. Soon after, Alice landed a job thanks to a relative's connection. The position allowed her to make good use of her skills at a nearby factory, and to her surprise, it turned out to be far more rewarding than she'd imagined. What excited her the most was a constant shift in tasks. No 2 days ever felt the same. Even when she came home drained, there was a deep, gratifying sense of growth. She often shared every detail with Nick over dinner, talking through her day with animated enthusiasm. One evening, as they ate together, she casually brought up a 3-week business trip on the horizon. She'd be staying with an old classmate during that time. "Sorry to leave you to manage everything alone," she said with a soft, apologetic grin. "I'll make it up to you when I'm back, I promise. I'll help you catch up on your studies." Nick gave a quiet nod, pride and a faint loneliness flickering inside him. He was happy for her. This was exactly the sort of opportunity she'd worked hard for. Still, the idea of spending 3 weeks in an empty apartment wasn't something he looked forward to. But he understood. This wasn't something she could pass up. When he asked about her departure, Alice said her flight was at the end of the week. After she arrived in the capital, her longtime friend Jane and Jane's partner Nate were waiting to welcome her. Jane was overjoyed. It had been years since they last saw each other, and she couldn't wait to catch up. Time moved fast. The job was intense, filled with back-to-back meetings and fresh challenges that demanded most of Alice's energy. By the end of each day, she barely had the strength to do more than crawl into bed, often falling asleep before she even hit the pillow. Jane tried to adjust her schedule to spend more time with Alice, but it wasn't always easy. Still, one night would come to haunt Alice. One she'd eventually wish she could erase completely. "You off work today?" Nate asked casually over breakfast. Alice gave a small nod. "How about we go out tonight?" Nate suggested. "Grab a few drinks. Maybe chill with a movie." Jane shrugged. "Yeah, sounds good." Alice smiled and agreed. That evening, the three of them picked up drinks and snacks and settled into the living room. Choosing a movie took longer than expected, and in the middle of their banter, Alice felt an unexplainable restlessness creeping in. Eventually they made a choice, but she found it hard to concentrate. Her eyelids grew heavy. Before long, she drifted into sleep. She woke up sometime in the middle of the night, blinking in confusion. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it hit her, and a cold shiver ran down her back. She was still on the couch, but what shocked her was Nate's arms wrapped tightly around her. Panicking, she tried to move away, but his grip only tightened. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "SH." The alcohol still clouded her thoughts, making it hard to think straight. Everything felt hazy, unreal, but the low whisper pulled her sharply back into awareness. Her whole body tensed. Then Nate began touching her, slowly, deliberately, and every part of it felt wrong. His hands were unwelcome, invasive. She didn't know how to react. She froze, paralyzed by fear and confusion. The next day, not a single word was exchanged about what had happened. They both went on with their routines as if the night before had never occurred. Alice said nothing, She convinced herself it must have been a mistake, maybe a one-time lapse in judgment fueled by the alcohol. Besides, she reasoned, nothing technically happened, at least not something she could easily explain, and the thought of telling Nicholas was terrifying. What would she even say? When she finally returned home, Nicholas greeted her with a kind of warmth that hit her straight in the heart. He stood there holding a vibrant bouquet and a bunch of helium balloons bobbing behind him. His whole face lit up when he saw her, and he wrapped her tightly in his arms. "I missed you so much," he whispered. He murmured into her hair, his breath warm against her skin. That single moment unraveled her. Guilt flooding in so swiftly it felt like being pulled under by a wave, thick, disorienting, and impossible to ignore. A few days later, Nicholas's phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. He answered, cautious. A soft voice greeted him, unfamiliar, yet oddly tentative. "Nick, you probably don't remember me." His brow furrowed. Hi. Who is this?" "It's Jane." He straightened up in his chair. She sounded nervous, her words tiptoeing into strange territory. Indirect questions, oddly personal, and without a clear reason behind them. Nicholas responded politely, though his confusion only grew. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped the pretense. "Nate and I broke up," she said, her voice flat. "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied slowly, still unsure why she was calling. There was a pause, followed by a heavy exhale. "It wasn't just a single reason," she said. "It was the kind of stuff he did while I wasn't around. Girls from the bar. He brought them home when I was at work." Nick shifted in his seat, unease rising in his chest. "Okay, but why are you telling me this?" Jane hesitated again, her silence more telling than her words. "Because there's something you don't know. Something she won't ever tell you." Nicholas didn't wait to hear more. He ended the call with a curt thank you and sat there in stunned silence, the phone still resting in his hand. Her words echoed in his head like a slow-spreading poison. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the weight in his chest wouldn't go away. That evening, he brought home a bottle of wine. Over dinner, he poured a glass for Alice, who raised an eyebrow in mild surprise before accepting it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They exchanged the usual pleasantries, both avoiding the deeper thoughts swirling beneath the surface. Then, mid-meal, Nick brought up a story, one that wasn't his. He told her about a friend who'd been betrayed by his wife, his tone deliberately casual. He watched her closely as he spoke, hoping her reaction might reveal something. Alice listened calmly, her expression unreadable. She nodded sympathetically, never once flinching at the story's painful theme. Just as the conversation trailed off, Alice's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face drained of color. It was a message from Jane. "I told your husband everything and then some." The words hit like a slap. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes meeting Nicholas's across the table. In that moment, she understood exactly why he had told that story. He knew. "What did she send?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with gravity. Tears welled in Alice's eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." She instinctively moved to leave the table, panic surging through her. But Nick reached out, gently stopping her with a single quiet gesture, his eyes never leaving hers. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked softly. Alice gave a slow, trembling nod. She couldn't form the words. Every part felt like it was unraveling. The silence between them grew unbearably thick, filled with everything left unsaid. Nicholas's thoughts spiraled, disjointed and jagged, while the clock ticked on, indifferent, a moment imploding in front of it. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'll leave," he said, his voice even but heavy with pain. Alice's tears flowed freely now, but Nick didn't move to comfort her. Instead, he stood, the decision already made. The apartment, a gift from Alice's parents, had always belonged to her. Now it belonged to her alone. Nicholas packed a few things and left that night, crashing on a friend's couch until he could figure out his next steps. The divorce followed swiftly, a quiet, bitter conclusion to a once bright love story. In the month that came after, Alice didn't remarry. She tried dating, but nothing stuck. Every connection crumbled before it became something real. Her friends, once loyal and close, quietly pulled away when the truth came out. They couldn't bring themselves to trust her anymore, not after what she'd done to them. Alice had become someone to avoid. Work was the only refuge she had left. By day, she buried herself in her job, losing herself in routines and tasks just to keep her mind from wandering. But once the sun dipped below the skyline, she was alone. That's when the silence became unbearable. That's when the wine bottle came out. Drink by drink, she tried to silence the voice inside, the one that reminded her of everything she'd lost. But no matter how much she drank, the bitterness in her heart remained. And so, each night, Alice sat with her regrets. A woman whose world had once felt so full, now surrounded by echoes.